The Toronto housing market is in a deep freeze right now. At least that's what I'm seeing in my local housing market. I have never seen houses sit on the market for this long or be terminated by the realtor and their seller and taken off the market. And I'm talking about beautiful, gorgeous, brand new houses that have been just put on the market, sitting there for 40 days. Okay, so let's talk about what is happening. In this video, I'm going to go through three things. What is happening right now, what we think is going to happen in January and February, and we're going to go through some things which are going to affect the Bank of Canada's next decision as to whether they're going to raise interest rates or not. Hi there, my name is Marcy Verberg. I'm a realtor here in Toronto. I love this kind of analysis stuff, so stay with me. I'm going to go through some charts with you and hopefully give you some insights. Let's start by going through a couple of things that are happening right now in the Toronto market. Right now, the average price month over month is actually flat. Now, I'm going to come back to these at the end of the video and give you some specifics, but this is just going to lead into this discussion. So right now we're flat versus last month. However, our new listings in the city and the GTA are up by 16.6%. So that's huge. The price is down a little bit versus last month. And we have stable inventory right now of about 2.4 months supply of inventory. That means that if all the houses sold in the GTA, it would take 2.4 months for them to sell out. Now we're also seeing that houses are selling just under their asking price. That's what this SLPR number means, sales to listing price ratio. What it really means, if you put your house on the market at say $1 million, and then it sells at $980,000, you're at 98% of your asking price. As you all know, a couple of years ago, they were going way higher. And you can stay tuned in another video because we're going to talk about new Government of Canada regulations where they've just said we can actually open the bidding process if you want to. We're going to see how that can work. But for now, let's also just say, stick to these data points. What we're also seeing is that the sales volume is down 6%. Now, these charts are really interesting because what I'm seeing actually out there is that houses are sitting a long time in the good neighborhoods, which is really interesting. Although this is only saying that they're down a little bit. Okay, so what else are we going to talk about? That was my kind of lead into the discussion. Now, TREB, that's the Toronto Real Estate Board, they put out every month a report, and it basically tells you kind of what their thoughts are ongoing, and that's what the media follows along. So what the president of TREB has said last month is that, of course, the housing market is very sensitive to interest rates, as we all know, and we've had 11 increases in 1 year, and then December 6th, they actually held still on those interest rates, which was good. So what they're saying is that because the bond yields are stabilized and are trending lower, we're anticipating that the fixed rate mortgages are going to smooth out, perhaps go down. And they're also anticipating that Bank of Canada may do some cuts, and that will make the housing market more affordable for everybody. But the question is that going to really make the housing market more affordable? And is the Bank of Canada actually going to be cutting any rates this spring? So let's talk a little bit about the recent output by the Bank of Canada. Bank of Canada was actually talking quite a bit about what's happening with immigration and how that affects inflation. All right, so what we're really looking for right now, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more, is how do we balance immigration and inflation? And is that even something that we should be thinking about? Okay, so let's start by talking about the benefit of bringing newcomers into Canada. We all know we need newcomers to balance our economy, to grow our economy. We know that we've got a 2 to 3% growth in our output in our economy due to the help of all these wonderful newcomers without really adding to inflation. What we know is that when people first come to the country, they buy things, they do add a little bit of inflation, but really it's not that significant. It's only about 0.1%. So just coming here and buying things isn't really that big a deal. However, we've had a few issues in terms of what we refer to as shelter inflation. Now, shelter inflation is the impact on the actual housing prices. Now, what's happened is because we have all these new immigrants coming into Canada, it's actually impacting the shelter inflation, as we know. Now, what do the numbers actually really say? And I just want to point out that it's not just the fact that we're bringing people in, it's the fact that this housing system was broken a long time before we started doing this. And perhaps, policy should have been put into place along with the immigration policies to help build up our housing inventory. and we haven't been doing that. Okay, so here's some really interesting numbers. You'll see this chart I'm talking about. From 2019 till now, we've had a 50% increase in immigration. In the last 12 months alone, we've welcomed 1 million more people. This is me, and this is also 60% of these people are not permanent residents. We're welcoming more refugees, more temporary workers, and more students. Now, because we are on our own, declining as a population, we need to have more immigration in order to boost up our economy. We also need to fill a number of jobs because as people that live here retire, there's no one to replace them. So this helps us to grow as a country. Now, the problem is that immigration is intersecting with a housing supply shortage. Now, the Bank of Canada was recently talking about whether this has an impact on inflation. And in fact, it actually does. It's coupled with a couple of things, such as zoning restrictions, a lengthy permitting process, and a shortage of construction workers. So up until this year, we've had a very low amount of housing starts in Canada. And we now have seen, you've seen the governments all coming together to try to fix that situation. But what's happening is all these new people coming into the country have really affected the rental supply and the housing supply. So now we have to figure out what exactly does that mean? And what does that, and what do we actually, or what are we actually going to do with that? So this is according to a recent speech by the Governor Tony Gravel. He's at the Bank of Canada, and he is saying that Canada's vacancy rate has literally fallen off a cliff. We are in dire straits with the amount of housing available right now to us. Now, does that actually help us when it comes to making things more affordable? No. And shelter price inflation actually accounts for 25% of our consumer price index. Shelter price inflation rose 6.1% in October and contributed, get this, 1.8% to the 3.1% inflation that we saw in October. So given that information, what is the Bank of Canada going to do? Also, let's talk about interest rates just for a minute. We talked a few minutes ago about how the government uses interest rate, the Bank of Canada actually uses interest rates to control our inflation. But they've got a bit of a challenge here. They're trying to balance out between inflation, shelter inflation, right? They know that bond yields are favorable. They know that interest rates are needed to bring down the inflation. Now, this is something I'm kind of throwing in here my own, which is interest rates really contribute to the cost of mortgages and rent. And renters may not realize this, but in the last, as we're all renewing our mortgages on our rental properties, that's really impacting the cost of the monthly mortgage on those rental properties that people have. So it's actually driving up rent prices where it can. Now, the Toronto Real Estate Board is saying that we're going to see a rate decrease. But the Bank of Canada is looking for a balance. They don't want to see inflation come up anymore. So the question is, are we really going to see these rates drop in early 2024? Well, nobody knows exactly because nobody has a crystal ball. However, I would go in with a bit of caution, thinking that we're going to get a big rate decrease kind of in that Jan, Feb, or early 2024. I think we need to see what's actually going to happen with these new housing supply policies. And we also need to see what's going to happen with bond yields. And we also need to see what happens with Christmas spending and see what happens now. Now, here's a little tip for you. Did you know that parcels at Canada Post are down by 14% right now? That really indicates that people are really feeling some pain from the economy. And I just wanted to add something that I've been really concerned about. And that's the fact that we're in a place right now where we're actually unhousing people in order to balance this market out, meaning that as people's mortgages are coming up that they renewed really high, some people are needing to move to get a cheaper way to live, which, I kind of question really whether that's a good thing. I mean, it's obviously not a good thing for those people. I'm really worried that what the Bank of Canada is doing is kind of, making policy decisions that are good for the many, but actually will unhouse some people. So that concerns me there. Okay, so what should we do in this market with our house? Okay, so if you are a seller, and this is December of 2023 right now, I would not sell your home right now unless you absolutely need to. What I would do is think about the spring market. So you've got Jan and Feb to get your home ready. What I would do is, sit down with a realtor, go through what things you can do to home improvements, kind of get your house ready. And then we can see when the spring market comes as to whether it makes sense to sell in the spring or wait until the fall of 2024 to actually sell your home. Now, if you really need to get out from underwater, I have another video for you on what to do if you're underwater with your mortgage. And can you wait a while? Or should you be selling right now? And if you need to sell right now, then you need to use some very good strategies to sell your home because things are still moving. We're just using a little bit of different strategies. So there's a couple of my own thoughts on what we should do. And as always, I promise to give you a bit of a recap of the Toronto market. So here's your listing stats or your stats. The Toronto sales activity, we know that listings are up 16.6%. We know that the prices year over year for November are pretty much flat, interestingly enough. Outside of the GTA, we are seeing a couple of areas where they're down 3 to 4% in general, but I think it gets balanced out because GTA is such a large place, right? And here we go. I know everybody's interested in seeing detached semi condo prices. So here's your comparison of 416,905. So you can see that the detached homes are selling for, an average of $1.6 million, which is actually up 3.5%. In the 905, there's detached is 1.3 million, which is flat. Your semi-detached in Toronto is 1.2, which is up 2.4%. Semi-detached in the 905 area code is 949, which is up almost 3%. Keep in mind, though, there's not as many semi-detached that sell in those areas. Your townhome sales are down about 3% in Toronto and flat everywhere else. And your condo apartments continue to be down just under 2% in Toronto, and they're actually up this month in the other places. So there you have it, guys. That is a quick review of what is going on. I know it doesn't give you perfect answers, but hopefully it gives you some information to think about in terms of your housing value, whether you want to move, and whether you want to sell your home. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. My information is below. And if you like this video, it would be really lovely if you could click like or subscribe. I'd really appreciate it.